Okay, we are officially live. Well, it's nice to have you here. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Win of the Win Collective. At least I believe that's who I am currently. Life is hard sometimes. But yeah, no. I'm 24. We have our Twitter account, which is Win Plus One, which was supposed to be just Win Plus, but Twitter immediately booted me, so I had to remake the account. And yeah, and also obviously we have BPD.
Thank you for introducing yourself. I did in the description of the video, I linked your Twitter so people could check you out if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
Awesome. So the first question is could you explain a bit more what BPD is?
BPD stands for borderline personality disorder. I had to. It's strange. I had to look up a few things because like while I have it, it's like it's very hard to describe things to other people what they are. But essentially, it is a disorder that comes along with essentially very heavy emotional irregularity. Um, it's very hard to uh, control emotions. So we experience a lot of very strong all or nothing thought processes, like either something is all good or something is all bad. It can move between a lot of times for people with BPD. What also comes with BPD tends to be a lot of self-image issues, issues with behavior, very unstable relationship problems. That's very common. Very intense relationships, either platonic or romantic.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that a bit more. And you said what the acronym stood for, right?
Yes, borderline personality disorder.
I just wanted to double check because I know we've been
Yeah, no,
calling it by the acronym.
no, you're fine.
Okay.
You're fine.
What were some of the signs that made you realize that you had BPD?
Give me just a second. Sorry. Okay, let me turn that. Okay. So I'm going to be. It was a thing that apparently was clear to a lot of people, but not to me. Growing up, like I know when I first started figuring this stuff out, talking with my partner about it, he'd be like, "Yeah, that makes sense." Um, and also my roommate who also has BPD, and I've known they had BPD before I even we even started looking into this stuff. Um, they started seeing my symptoms, and they were like, something is going on, but neither of them ever really pushed on it because you know, um, but growing up, even though I would have moments of things not seeming necessarily okay, I never really was able to understand that that was BPD because I had a very thin definition of how BPD presented. Obviously, if any of your symptoms are even slightly different from something else, you're like, can't be that. Um, so, like, for example, growing up, I had a partner who had BPD, and he had a lot more um, external presentation of his BPD. A lot more just external, while a lot of my symptoms are more internal. And because of that, I was in that thought process of like, oh, that's BPD. Like I can't align my feelings and my emotions with BPD because obviously I don't present in that manner. Same with my current roommate, where it was just like, he would have these moments of like despair or upset and just all these symptoms. And
Mhm.
I could not necessarily understand, or at the very least, I didn't want to understand in a way. A lot of coming to terms with my own BPD has been learning patience with other people's BPD, because there's a lot of stuff in general with these sort of disorders that if you have it too, it can lead to sometimes very good understanding. Sometimes you get stressed and you want to remove yourself from the situation. And that's kind of where I was always for the longest period of time, was not necessarily understanding, just moving away from it. I know I remembered this only like I think a few months ago because system shit, but I think it was in high school, because we started figuring out our system stuff in high school. But there was a point where I guess I was more concerned that I did have BPD. And it might have been due to my ex. It might have been due to a different friend who was experiencing BPD symptoms. But either way, I remember I bought a book that was like, I Hate You, I Love You, I believe it was called. And I remember like I read that, I highlighted it, still somehow came away like that's not me, and then dumped that memory of ever even reading that, because it was only brought to my attention a few months ago. So like it's kind of been just a thing of like, it's a lot of denial, I guess. Denial and being like, that can't possibly be what's going on. It has to be like this, or it's always had to be something else, I guess, is what I mean.
Okay. Thank you for sharing a bit more about that. When you talk about internal versus external, do you mean more the symptoms or behavior, or what does that kind of look like?
Forgive me if I say something wrong, just because I'm still, in the process of learning a lot of this stuff.
If I overstep.
No, I know a lot of people like to refer to it as quiet versus loud BPD. I've heard a lot of mixed things about how it's not very good to define these sort of things, but the idea around it is that quiet BPD, a lot of the symptoms are internalized, so thus you are quieter, you don't lash out necessarily, or if you do, it's after a long period of time. All your emotions are inward and you don't talk about anything. So like I'll be dealing with this big ball of hatred for someone, they won't know. They won't have any clue, because I guess growing up have been conditioned to not express my feelings, so which obviously led to the BPD. While loud BPD is considered, lashing out, reckless behavior, just loud presentation, I guess, is the idea. And so the people I've known with BPD have always had louder presentations.
So is it kind of similar to how with DOD DID there's covert and overt? Is it a similar situation with that?
Yeah, I think it'd be a good comparison. Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. Does having BPD make it more difficult to seek treatment for DID?
In a way, yeah. I think it's obviously from one person to the next, they're going to tell you different things. But from my experience, and like from experience I've had with other people, BPD can come with a lot of identity issues. I know growing up, I had friends, or I would hear all the time about people thinking they had DID or OSDD, when in reality it was just their BPD symptoms, putting on these facets of and you get so confused with your own identity at times that you're like, that can't possibly be me, or your certain emotions are like, they feel so separate from you. Like, for example, if I have a really, really intense emotion like anger, the next day, that didn't feel like me. I couldn't tell you that was me. I know it was. I know in the sense of like, I have vague recollections. Like, I know that was me, but it didn't feel like it. Emotional wise, I have no attachment to who that person was or anything. So that's where I think it comes very difficult whenever seeking treatment, because people kind of do want to latch onto the idea that it's just the BPD. It's just you having an unstable relationship with your own identity. Also, obviously, it's something that I haven't dealt with personally yet, thankfully, but a lot of times, a lot of people don't want to really treat BPD, let alone DID.
Okay. How does having BPD affect being a system?
A lot. Oh, gosh. When we were younger, like I said, we started figuring stuff out about our system in high school. I I remember, I think one of the reasons that I even started to think we might have BPD was because one of our alters, PB, he presented very heavily with BPD symptoms, and he still does. He controls a lot of he feels a lot of the anger. He feels a lot of the willingness to disappear, cut people off, things like that. Um, and it, it felt, obviously so separate from me because it was his feelings. Um, but then I kind of just forgot about all that. But essentially, yeah, no, across systems, um, the BPD can really present very differently. Like it's the same thing with autism. Like we have autism, and our presentations are not going to be the same across all alters. Like I know we have some who get, like in the example of autism, get very overwhelmed in stores and things like that. But with the BPD, we it's very up and down, I guess, over who has what. Very split apart. Um, like I said, PB carries a lot of anger, a lot of the a lot of us seem to carry a lot of the emotional problems. It's very hard for certain parts to control how they feel and respond to other people when there is a perceived slight or a perceived um, dislike or misunderstanding. A lot of times, um, I'm grateful in the sense that, at least for like me personally, um, that it, I'm a very non-argumentative person, so I don't necessarily lash out often, and thankfully that's helped a lot of my relationships. But also, I am very distant at times. I have a lot of struggles with feeling as if people are going to up and vanish at any point. So my brain is like, we got to do that first.
Now I don't know if we talked about this in the beginning, but for other people's frame of mind, BPD is a trauma-based disorder, correct?
From what I understand, yes. I want to say there are beliefs that it can come from other areas of life, but from a lot of predominant beliefs and from a lot of look into things, a lot of the times it is trauma focused. Like there are traumatic events that followed before this happening.
Okay. Um, how does being a system affect your BPD?
It definitely can make understanding what is what confusing. Like in the sense of like, what is the DID? What is the BPD? Because sometimes you'll be like, is this really my anger, or is this somebody else, or is this my identity confusion, as in like the BPD identity confusion, or is this another alter? It really, I guess, messes with perception of situations because we have a lot of struggle with that.
Okay. Do your alters experience BPD differently from each other?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, PB experiences a lot of anger. It used to be a lot worse in high school. And, like, for context, we got out of a very bad situation in beginning of 12th grade. We went like for years and years to the same school that was uh, religious, and it was very led to a lot of the stuff that we go through now. But in 12th grade, we got out of that school. And so it was kind of like losing, the only best way I can describe it is like losing a family, like losing a good portion of your identity. So that's where a lot of our symptoms began to really heavily show, because in a way we were like abandoned. Um, and so PB became a lot more prominent during that period of time and began experiencing how we feel, how we would view like loud symptoms as like risk taking behavior, uh, self harm, just a bunch of bad things. Like I know, like we very nearly did not graduate high school because there was such a heavy issue with him skipping. Like just in the middle of the day, he would just at lunch he'd go out to our car and not come back. And during that time, like we either wouldn't know what he was doing or he would be doing bad things because he was angry and he was sad and he had all these emotions that he didn't know how to personally deal with. So we're going to deal with them in the worst ways possible, is the best way to describe it. So that was a time for a while there. Um, I know certain alters deal heavily with identity issues, um, and the feeling that at any moment people are just going to up and leave or not care that you exist. That's a very prominent feeling within the system, is that we are not worth being cared for, or it's almost like we're a ghost, I guess. That's the very common feeling, is that like you can very easily disappear into the background and not a single person will notice. And then that makes you angry because why won't people notice? And it's just this continuous cycle for certain alters who don't have as stable of, emotional um, holding. Some alters are they either are very good at corralling their symptoms, or they just don't have any. Like they probably do. Like um, I think all of our alters have autism, but like they're going to present very differently. But some have more minor symptoms, and that's probably the same for the BPD. But like some are able to, when they front, it's not hard for them to control their emotions or not do things they shouldn't, and so it's like kind of wish that were me. But so yeah, it is very different across, different alters, of who has what and how symptoms portray themselves, I guess.
What does having both disorder, oh, I'm sorry, I pronounced that wrong. Does having both disorders ever affect each other's treatment?
Um, like I said before, I think a lot of the handling of treatment, when it comes to the handling of treatment, um, a lot of it does come back to how either one is being viewed. So, for some reason, a lot of times, there's this thing in the psychiatrist field where like you can only have one problem going on. So we've dealt with that where it's like, okay, it's this thing, and I was like, it can be more than one of these things, so we can help with all of it. And they're like, no, it's just this one thing. And so that becomes a bit difficult when trying to seek help with that.
And I accidentally skipped a question, actually. I don't have my glasses on.
Oh, you're fine.
What is What does treatment for BPD look like?
Okay. I am still fairly new into my treatment, like figuring all that stuff out. But, oh crap, I left them over there. Well, for my personal BPD treatment, me and my therapist have been doing, I almost said CBT. That's not,
That's the one I do.
give me a second.
Are you talking about DBT?
DBT.
Yeah.
Sorry, my therapist gave me a little DPD deck, and it has a lot of useful information in it, I guess. But DBT is basically dialectical behavior therapy. A lot of it involves being able to process your emotions and accept change, accept that certain things are going to happen whether you like it or not. A lot of it is like radical self-acceptance, which I don't always agree with, but for the most part, I understand the point. Um, Sometimes it can very much feel like I'm gaslighting myself, but I understand the main point of it. And obviously, one thing is not going to work for everyone. One type of therapy isn't the same for everyone. But for me personally, it has been it's been very helpful with, I guess, learning these tools, because before I didn't have them available to me. It wasn't even like a thought process to do very, I guess, simple things like reach out to someone when you're feeling bad, or to talk to people rather than just make assumptions, because my brain would do that a lot, and I'd like disappear on a lot of people because my brain told me that they did not like me anymore. um, but I know, like, we've been only doing the DBT stuff for a little bit now, but it's been really helpful thus far. A lot of it is, I guess, doing it over and over again, and just, what is it called? Practicing. Like, it's very hard to practice, I will say, because when you're not feeling bad, you're like, why do I even need to do this? But then when the moment comes that, you're feeling bad and you're going through the bad moments, you aren't trained in how to handle them. And so a lot of it is building up practice in how to accept your emotions, accept uh, self-soothing. Self-soothing is a big part of it, because obviously you're not always going to be able to get the care from other people, and like that's okay. Like sometimes it's good to get reassurance from other people, but sometimes you can't always have that.
Yeah. Um, could you describe a bit of the stigma that surrounds BPD? Sorry.
It Okay, sorry, I just now saw the comments on the side, so my brain is like going over there. But there is a lot of fear about BPD, from people who don't really understand it, and just misunderstandings about it, I guess, because people, and I will be honest, like, being a person with BPD, that can be hard. Like, um, sorry, I'm trying to figure out my wording of this.
It's fine. Take your time.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's fine.
It takes a lot of patience with yourself, patience with other people. Um, and so, not everyone is going to be able to accept it and to understand it. Um, but, a lot of problems come from the fact that people don't really want to learn about it. And, like, if they do learn about it, they learn like very either not necessarily, not always bad information, but they will only take like very thin descriptions of people with BPD or the most um, the most outlandish, I guess, presentations of it. And that's not to say people who have like outlandish symptoms are bad or anything. I'm just saying that like BPD is going to be different for every single person who has it. And they, it's, you can't treat every person as if one size fits all, I guess. And that's what happens a lot of the time is that like every single person with BPD does this or this or this. And it's like, no, not true. I've met many people with BPD at this point who have such varying differences in how their symptoms present themselves. And it's very interesting in a way, but it's also very sad because like I said, a lot of people, unfortunately, a lot of psychiatrists too, don't want to look into it, I guess, because um, people with BPD is seen almost as like hard. I guess in a similar way that DID can be, where it's like it's too much to deal with. I know. Thankfully, I haven't dealt with anything, but like I live in the middle of goddamn Oklahoma, so we have a very slim picking of our psychiatrists. And I know my roommate has been like turned away at one point. Not here, but like other places. So it's just like people. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think there's better ways that people that don't have BPD allies could help reduce that stigma?
I definitely think it benefits to honestly just talk to people with BPD, listen to them. Because, like, I would say read stuff, but honestly, reading isn't very helpful. I mean, like, it's probably better now. But I know, like, when I was first getting into researching this stuff, when I was researching stuff for my roommate when he moved in, it was like walking on eggshells or how to survive people with BPD. It's always geared towards the victims or people dealing with people with BPD rather than people who have BPD themselves. So and you're always going to get a very thin view of other people if you're, I guess, taking advice only from the non BPD havers. So I think my main advice is definitely like listening to other people with BPD, getting a wide variety of voices. Like there's so much available with YouTube and Twitter, and just seeing how differently people like handle themselves, I guess, not just devoting your entire understanding of an illness to one perception of it.
Is there anything you'd like to let other systems or people know about BPD or anything?
Hmm. It can it can be managed. It I know for a lot of people with BPD, it can feel very hard and very hopeless a lot of the times because things are so difficult at times. But like there are good people, I guess, who are going to be willing to go on that journey with you and are going to be so kind about it. Like my partner and I, we have been together for nearly 10 years now. We had our ninth anniversary last November, and he has just been amazing through the entire process of like learning and helping me cope with this stuff because it's hard. It's scary, and I sometimes feel so crazy when I talk about how I feel because it doesn't sound correct. It doesn't sound nice or pretty, and I don't know how to make it that way. But he's very kind, and he will help me with, soothing and things like that, and being like, hey, I understand that this isn't just how you're really feeling, and we need to focus on how your emotions are making your body feel. Like, that's a big thing he talks about is, like, where do you feel the tenseness in your body? And we'll just sit there for a few minutes and just be quiet for a while. So I think that's a big thing I want to say, is that you're ultimately, there are going to be people who care about you enough to be there with you through stuff. Like, they can't fix it. My fiance, as wonderful he is, he can never stop the BPD. He can't make it better himself, but he can stay with me. He can be kind while I figure stuff out and love me through it. And that's honestly all I really need from him. And so, like, I know so much with BPD, people struggle with, unstable relationships, people who misuse them. But, like, eventually there is going to come to a point where someone will be kind. Someone will be there with you, whether it's romantic or platonic. We are capable of having the most meaningful relationships. Sometimes it just takes a while, and that sucks. But yeah.
If people would like to follow you, or if you have any social medias you'd like to promote.
Yeah. Like I said at the beginning, my Twitter is WinPlus1. Anywhere else you would find me, like TikTok or Instagram, I'm just WinPlus.
I'm gonna actually write that down so I can follow you on TikTok.
It's
I didn't realize
fairly
one.
new. I have a lot of trouble with being perceived, so, like, sometimes I'll just be like, okay, I'll try today.
I didn't even know you had one, so that'll be fun to look at. It was really nice having you on here. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and everyone about this subject.
Yeah, of course. No, I was really nervous, but it was actually really nice.
Well, my channel's always here if you ever want to come back. It was really nice to meet you.
You too.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.